Mr. Vice Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, next to the organ of sight, namely our eyes, our organs of hearing, namely our ears, play a profoundly important part in our daily lives. There is, of course, from the point of view of the physicist, a profound and quite fundamental difference between the physical agencies that are responsible for the sensations of sight and hearing. Whereas in the case of light, we are dealing with an extraordinarily subtle kind of disturbance propagated in space with enormous velocity and with frequencies which expressed in figures are truly astronomical. In the case of sound, we are dealing with material vibrations usually coming to us through the atmosphere, and the frequencies are comparatively low. I want to make it clear at this point that there is no physical limitation of the frequencies of sound to those that we hear. In fact, one of the most striking developments in modern acoustical theory and practice has been the development of sources of so-called sound, really material vibrations of very high frequencies. Now, one of the reasons why I've chosen this subject, there are several reasons. In the first place, right back from the days when I was a student, as I said, in my teens at college, I got interested in the theory of vibrations, and that naturally led me on to the study of musical instruments. In fact, in the first 10 years or so of my scientific work, I was very largely devoted to the study of musical instruments, especially some of those that you see here. But later, I got also interested in the phenomena of what are called ultrasonics, frequencies much higher, not 10,000, but millions or hundreds of millions, and many of my later publications dealt with that subject. So I've always been, if I may say so, I've always been keenly interested in the study of those material vibrations which, if their frequencies are reasonably low, come to us through the sense of hearing. Now, I've already mentioned to you the basic difference between the physical agencies, light and sound. But apart from that, there are some very remarkable analogies. And these analogies certainly become more and more striking as we get away from the purely physical to the physiological aspects of the matter. Take, for example, the very obvious thing that we have two eyes and we have also got 2 ears. You may wonder why we have 2 ears. The reason is that the possession by us of 2 ears enables us to have some sort of idea of the direction from which a sound is coming. The directional sense for sound is very much far less accurate than the directional sense we have for light. And that, of course, is easily understood on the basis of physical principles. There are also other analogies. Now, in my address here two nights ago, I spoke to you of the color sense, and I emphasized that the monochromatic, what we call monochromatic or vibration of light, is fundamental to the study of color. Now, that idea is really derived from the fact that in the field of sound also, the basic sensations are the pure harmonic tones. Now, every teacher of physics knows that he does not begin with the study of noises, he begins with the study of pure musical tones. And that is in fact the reason why I said in light also we have to start with monochromatic light, light having a specific energy quantum and so on. That's one very important thing. Now, and just as we have the sensation of color as we pass from the red to the violet, we have a continuous change of color, visible color. In the case of sound also, we have the sensation of pitch. That is to say, we can differentiate at once by ear without any difficulty whatsoever. The sounds whose frequencies are very low, of the order of say 20 or 30, which we can hear, right up to the limit of audition, which depends very much upon the age of a person. When I was young, probably I could hear about 40,000. Now that I am old, I am getting the very useful accomplishment of being deaf to many sounds that are no use to me at all. Now, there is a very interesting point about it, that the world is full of sounds, but the human organism has very usefully restrained itself, if I may say so, confined itself to providing means by which we can hear the sounds that are of some use to us, and we simply are deaf to the very high frequency sounds if they are there at all. In this connection, I ought to mention that one of the most remarkable properties of the sense of hearing is that the pulsation, the pressure variations necessary for hearing are very large at low frequencies. But as you go up, there is a certain frequency, about something I'll mention presently, at which extremely small fluctuations of pressure are very clearly audible as sound. And it may not be altogether accidental that the pitch of the sounds to which the ordinary human being is most sensitive correspond approximately to the pitch of a shrill feminine voice. I'm not sure whether this has any special biological significance, but it is approximately true. At that pitch, the ear is astonishingly sensitive. In fact, it can be shown that the sensitivity is absolutely greater than anything we can imagine. Higher up, we become less and less sensitive, and ultimately we cease to hear those sounds. Now, all this introduction is by way of leading up to my subject of musical sounds. I ought to mention, however, that the ear has got certain properties which the eye does not possess to the same extent. We have the power, and I think it's also largely a consequence of the difference in the physiological mechanisms. We can attend simultaneously to several conversations. Today, for example, I was talking to somebody and listening to somebody else and so on. Many people have cultivated the art. I think also the judges of the High Court have cultivated the art of being able to listen to something and be doing something else all the time. That is a very well-known art of listening to 2 or 3 people simultaneously. It's possible our ears have a very remarkable capacity for fixing attention simultaneously on different sounds. Now the eye, unfortunately, except in the very rare case, in the exceptional case, I mentioned to you of the purple colors, the eye cannot differentiate. If 2 or more lights are present simultaneously, it fuses them together. The reason for that I need not enter into. I mentioned it casually the other day. The ear, on the other hand, as you say, it can simultaneously recognize the presence in a composite sound of different tones, especially if they are of unrelated frequencies. There's a particular case of very great interest in which if 2 sounds have vibrations which are related to each other in a very simple fashion, then some kind of fusion occurs. The fusion depends entirely upon the lack of attention. If you attend to it carefully, we can separate them. If you don't attend to it, they produce a conjoined sensation. Now that's a very remarkable, extremely remarkable faculty of the human ear. Now having said all this, I think it's time that I begin to talk to you about music. Now is one of the most remarkable facts about human culture, the extraordinarily important part that music of some sort or another has played and continues to play in human life. I am not an anthropologist. I have not thought it worthwhile to trace back this remarkable development in human history. But you can see it illustrated if you examine, for example, if you notice what is happening in some of the wilds of the world where the so-called primitive tribes are still living. You can study the music of various countries which have stood still in the march of civilization. You can study India, the East, and you see what is happening today in the West. The music is a continuing, it is to some extent a characteristic of a particular state of human civilization. But it is not static. It is advancing all the time. And that advance is shown in various ways, which I shall mention a little later. But one thing is certain, that music has a very profound effect on us all. It does not matter to what race or what civilization and so on we belong to. I will not venture into discussing the effect of civilization, the effect of music on plants. We all know the cobra charmer, the snake charmer who plays the something and you see the snake dancing like that. Now if a terrible snake, deadly snake can be subject to music, anything can be subject to music. But why is it? Now this is an extremely important question to ask ourselves. Why is it that music influences us so powerfully? Now there are two sides to that question. If it is it merely because we possess the capacity to discriminate sounds of different pitch, different loudness, and different quality and so on? Is it because merely of that? Well, I don't think that is an adequate explanation. My own feeling is that it is not only because we have the sense of hearing with some very remarkable properties to which I have already alluded, it is also connected to the fact that we have built up into our own physical body and not so very far away from our ears, a mechanism for producing sound, and especially musical sound. Now you see, it's rather difficult to know to what stage, I have not really gone into the matter, at what stage of zoological evolution man developed a musical voice. Many of the animals, for example, they are only capable of emitting terrifying roars. I know, for example, the gibbon. I have seen a gibbon shouting. You could hear him a mile off, and it was definitely not musical at all. Whether they are more musical in private conversations with each other, I don't know, because we don't listen to them. But if you really want to appreciate the fact that human beings are not the only people who can produce music, you've only got to go into a forest and listen to the birds singing. These lovely things we call birds, they represent a very high state of civilization, if I may say so, and in their own way. And it's a wonderful treat to listen to the bird voices singing. There are, of course, birds that don't sing so well, but taken broadly, the bird world is a wonderful example of organized life capable of producing pleasant sounds. So much so that when we find a great lady, for example, sings beautifully, what do we say of her? Oh, Kokila Gana or something. We compare her to a bird, you see. Now please remember that that is a tribute not to the lady but to the bird. And as I was saying, it is because of this fact. Can't all of us sing beautifully? In fact, if some of us start singing, we shall have to plug both our ears at once. It is essentially, the fact is, I think singing must have come out of the practice of speech. Now, I say that a person's civilization, or rather this degree of culture to which he has attained, can be found out at once, the moment he opens his mouth and begins to talk. A civilized person modulates his voice. He does not shout when he can be heard, when he speaks gently. He tries to make his voice pleasant, modulate it and so on. I think it is a mark of culture that we do not use our voices arbitrarily so as to hurt other people's ears. We try to please everybody by modulating the voice. And that is why, of course, you know, women are generally much more popular with men than men themselves. Because the feminine voice, by its very nature, it is softer, maybe higher pitch, but essentially not so raucous and not so biting and harsh as the male voice. But there's no reason why the male voice should be so harsh. It's all a matter of cultivation. Now, at some stage or other in the development of human civilization, people must have discovered they could also imitate birds and produce musical sounds. And it is the very fact, I think myself, the development of music must have had a great deal to do with the development of the art of using the human voice to produce pleasing successions of sounds. Now, this is all, to some extent, perhaps speculative. But it is very important to remember that, because I want to stress that even today, there is no doubt at all, and especially I think music lovers in Madras will agree with me that we may have musical instruments and musical instruments, but there's nothing which moves us so powerfully, which can produce such an emotional impact on us as a lovely human voice, trained and singing at its best. No, it's the same all over the world. A solo singer, if he's a really great singer, can attract audiences who will never go there to listen to a great orchestra. In any case, it is a very wonderful experience to hear a really fine voice, trained and performing at its highest excellence. Now we see we have coupled together, you see, this is a very interesting thing. We have coupled together hearing and singing, because I think it is the union of these two faculties in a human being that has really, I think, that's only a speculation on my part, that I think is really the origin of the development of musical instruments. Well, you may ask me, if you have the human voice, why musical instruments at all? What is the necessity? What is the psychological or other necessity for the development of human voice, of other musical instruments? Now, I think that the answer to that is not very difficult to find. See, it's not everybody who's got a fine voice. A lady, for example, may have a voice which she does not like other people to hear. In which case, she has to have an alternative, you see. And then we say, all right, teach her the veena or the violin or something. The point is this, you see. If you can't sing, you can at least play some instrument, the piano or whatever it is, you can play it in a nice way, and so that you charm through an instrument. Well, that's one explanation. There are others also. The fact is this, the human voice has only got a limited compass. No human voice extends over the whole range of audition, not at all. In fact, they classify voices according to the range. They start from the baritone and so on, and then you go up to the soprano. So that it's quite clear that if one wants to develop musical sounds and make use of them, we have to have instruments whose compass is not limited by the circumstances of the human voice. That is one reason. Another reason is this, the energy of the human voice. That is before the days of mics and so on, microphones. The energy of the human voice is not at its best in the open air. You do require more powerful instruments which fill a larger halls or the open air, and therefore the development of mechanical instruments other than the human voice came almost naturally. There is yet another consideration, which I think is also of extraordinary importance. See, the more cultured people are, the more they like to vary the kind of thing that pleases them. A human voice may be very good, but there are other musical sounds which also please us. Take, for example, in all the ancient traditions, we always hear of the flute, for example, or the pipes. They have peculiar and a characteristic and extremely pleasing tone. So the enjoyment of a different sort of sound from the musical voice must also have led to the development of musical instruments. And here, there is a very interesting point. The kind of musical instrument that pleases us most, that appeals to us most, is one that reproduces in some degree the characteristic qualities of the human voice. Now you see, one of the characteristics of human voice is that if you control it, you can produce a continuously, for a long time, a sound of a definite pitch. I have seen in some of the great opera houses, a lady starts, a soprano, she starts singing, and she goes on for, we are all just stunned to hear her go on, give the same note for a minute or two. Simply incredible, absolutely unwavering, you see. And then the house comes down with applause. You see, the production of a continuous sound can be carried to astonishing lengths by trained voices. Now, only those musical instruments. See, the most primitive instruments are those in which you produce a noise which lasts a short time. If you go, for example, to Bali, the island of Bali, you see their favorite instrument is a xylophone. You have a lot of sticks and you go on beating like that. Mind you, I don't decry the xylophone. A xylophone, properly played, can be a very charming thing, you see. But that's an exception. These musical tones that please us are the flute, for example. You get a continuous tone, somewhat resembling a fine musical voice. Take the stringed instruments. No doubt we have stringed instruments which are simply plucked, like the veena, the tanpura, the guitar, and so on. Well, they're very nice. But there's no doubt at all that the invention of a stringed instrument which can produce a steady musical tone, the intensity of which can be controlled, the pitch of which can be varied or fluctuated, that was a great invention. It is ascribed, at least according to some encyclopedias that I consulted, to Ravana, who wanted to please Mandodari, you see. The invention of the bow, what a horrible man to invent such a beautiful thing, you see. The invention of the bow is attributed to him. I think it's probably an indication that it was really an Indian invention. But it is, we all know the various forms of bowed instruments, but remarkably enough, you see, the development of bowed instruments went very far indeed in the hands of certain great Italian constructors, the Stradivarius Violin. See, this has a Tamil name, we call it pittal, you see, we don't call it fiddle. See, we so love this instrument that we have almost forgotten its European origin. We have given it a name, taken it to our hearts, literally. We call it pittal, you see. This is, let me remind you, this is a European instrument. Essentially, a great invention of a very great group of artists, Stradivarius, Guarnerius, and so on. The violin, as you all know, in South India, it is an indispensable thing. You cannot imagine any performance of any sort without the violinist accompanying. Not only so, not only as an accompaniment. I've listened to great masters in South India playing on the violin. When I was a little boy, just about 3 years old, only 3 years old, I remember sitting when Thirukkodikavar Krishnan played the violin. And that impression still rings in my ears. And historically, that had something to do with my having in later years undertaken to study the mechanics of the violin bowing. I'm mentioning to you because it's a typical example of how an instrument is improved, and the improvement tends towards making it resemble the human voice in certain characters, the pleasing characters. Now there is another and a very wonderful example. See, and I want to mention that, take this question of percussion instruments, drums, for example, gongs, and so on. We all know that they are essentially noise producers. You must all have heard the tom-tom of the villages, deafening noise. But you see, ancient India, they didn't love noises. They wanted music. And many years ago, I was very much impressed by this instrument, only one side of which you see. We call it, in northern India, it's called the tabla. Of course, there's another side, we call it the mridanga, you see. It occurred to me to investigate why it is that we have this remarkable construction. Double ring of leather and a kind of a hard but flexible material attached to it. I asked myself, what is the purpose of this thing? And a little investigation proved conclusively that here our ancients had invented a harmonic drum. Whereas an ordinary drumhead produces a succession of notes which have no relationship at all. The whole purpose of this construction was to convert it into a harmonic instrument, that is to say, which gives a succession of notes which have exactly the same relation to each other as the successive harmonics of a string or a flute. That is the point. They have done it. And I will demonstrate it to you a little later on, how they have done it and why they have done it. That's one of the points in my lecture. Now, why did they do this? Because when we sing, or when a violin is played, or for the matter that any instrument having continuous musical tone is played, we know from physical principles that sound can be analyzed into harmonic overtones. The relationship stands to each other. The vibration frequency is as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And they have done this. They have constructed the musical drum as giving out a series of harmonic notes. Now I think the very fact that this instrument has been known for a long time, that it is an invariable accompaniment of Indian concerts, I think is perhaps a mute tribute to the inventive genius of our ancient musicians or musical constructors in our country. It's a tribute to the fact that they understood, at least in a general way, the qualities of tone which are pleasing and those which are not. Now I have spoken at some length. I have expounded, broadly speaking, the basic ideas of musical instruments. Now I want you to realize that we, of course, have in our country, we are quite content, you see, to have a thing like the flute, like the veena and the tanpura and the violin and so on. I have no time today to talk to you about some of the remarkable features of construction which are found in our veena, for example, or the tanpura. I made them the subject of investigation many years ago, and they show some very remarkable features. But I do not wish to talk about it today because I have something of a different nature to stress in my address to you this evening. Now, it's quite true that we have these instruments. We are quite satisfied with them. So far as the kind of music that we have in our country, which we all enjoy, which we go in crowds listen to, is quite all right. But I want at the same time to enter a kind of caveat. Let us not imagine that this exhausts the possibilities of music. See, I have traveled abroad many times, very short intervals, but I could not help being impressed by some of the achievements of the Western civilization in the field of the construction of musical instruments. For example, you walk into any of these great cathedrals in England, France, Germany, elsewhere, and you listen to the tremendous instruments they call the organs. The construction of the organ has been improved. It's always been very wonderful, but it has been greatly improved over recent years, and we have great concert halls in which we have as many as 10,000 pipes, ranging in length from half an inch to 40 feet. The whole thing arranged in such a massive fashion that it is a part of the architectural features of the building to see these organ pipes arranged. They're constructed to harmonize with the building. And they are so enormous that they have to have 50 horsepower motors to blow them, and all electrical connections, so that by simply the lightest pressure can make these pipes sound. That's today. But there are other ways later on. And I think it's a marvelous experience. I must say that quite frankly. It's a marvelous, almost a spiritual experience to be inside one of these great cathedrals and listen to these organs being played. The whole air trembles with it. The body thrills, literally, physically thrills to the sound, and as it goes up and down, you get a wonderful experience. Now I'm telling this to you because let us not think that we have the monopoly of wisdom or inventiveness in these matters. They also have, in Europe, as you know, it's another thing, very wonderful thing, which is worth listening to. We may not always like European music. Some is good, some is not so good. But one cannot help admiring the way in which they have introduced mass effects. See, I've seen 50 violins being played simultaneously. 50 violins. Not to mention various magnified versions of the violin, up to the bass, violoncello, viola, and so on. A whole array of flutes, hundreds of voices. This massing of musical effects of various sorts. It may be voices, it may be stringed instruments, and so on. Is really a tremendous thing. One has to go there and listen to it, and unless you are prejudiced from the start, you say, all this is noise. Don't think so. Go there prepared to listen. You cannot have a feeling that that sort of thing is a great achievement. That is to say, it has raised music to a different plane altogether. And I think it's not a thing to be despised. Having said it now, I want to, at this stage, I want to illustrate to you. I have here an instrument which I didn't have it such a big one in Bangalore. I brought it down. It's been lent to me by Professor Hegde of the Engineering College. I just explain what it is. See, the sounds, I talked to you of sounds and harmonics and so on. The whole of that, all this, the theory of music, the character of periodic tones and so on, can be made visible by means of a cathode ray display. The arrangement is simply this. There's a microphone here, where the sounds of my voice or of whatever the instrument I play enter the microphone. They're converted to electric current. They're amplified. The currents are periodic. They're amplified by means of a little arrangement, and the amplified current moves a ray of cathode rays which impinge on the screen, and with the result, and there's an arrangement by which the spot is moved to and fro. If I don't sound, and please all of you must remain absolutely silent. The smallest whisper will disturb the instrument. Provided you remain absolutely silent, then I shall be able to demonstrate to you the various musical instruments, my own voice, the difference in the overtones, and so on and so on. You can see it all yourself. Smallest noise is this. Put out that. Now I will show you the overtone. No, play harmonium. You can see it very well. Now, show the different tones first. He's playing a little harmonium. Play those two tones. Now it's only speaking tone. Come further. That's it. Beat that tone. No, keep it. I'll play the violin. What a smooth tone you get. Now the effect of the mute. Have you got a mute here?
Yes.
Then give me the mute. I'll show you the effect of the mute. Yeah. Putting the mute on the violin. Now I put the mute on. Here's a wood put on the bridge, the violin. See what a tremendous difference it makes. Totally altered. Take it off. Big difference. Now then, lights, put on lights, please. Just one light. Just one or two. Now in this connection, I want to tell you some of the problems, scientific problems, in which I was engaged for many years. Now, one of the most interesting problems is in connection with the violin. You all know the violin, the construction of it, familiar to you. Now, the question is this: what is it that the bow does to the violin? You know, the player puts the bow on it, moves it. He presses it lightly or hard or whatever it is, and the art of the violinist consists to a very large extent on the perfection of his bowing. Of course, of his fingering and all the rest of it, yes, but the bowing is the great point. Some can get a very beautiful tone out of it. Now, what does the bow do? Now, curiously enough, this problem was left unsolved. When I was a student, the problem, they knew what the, geometrically what the bow did, but the mechanics of it, the precise nature of the mechanism by which the bow operates. You switch that off, please. Switch it off. And for several years, I worked on the problem and developed a mechanical theory of the violin. And what came out of it was this: that when we bow, the bow excites the bow, the string follows the bow, but the string excites the body of the instrument. And I showed that the actual pressure which the violinist must press on the bow, with the bow, on the string, is really determined not by the string, but by the body of the instrument. The resonance of the instrument, the communication energy from the string to the bridge to the body of the instrument, and thence to the air, they determine the pressure of bowing necessary. Not only so, they vary with the pitch of the sound. Now, this phenomenon can be shown very beautifully with the help of the big cello. You get marvelous effects called the wolf note and so on. Explained all those things and worked out why, as you notice now, here's the violin. I got a little piece of wood, hardly a tola in weight. Put it on it, you see now, marvelous effect. Now I put the mute on. This is used in music, the mute. Tremendous change just by a small piece of wood on the top. Why is that? That's one of the problems dealt with in my investigations. The mechanics of musical instruments, the whole construction, the rationale of all these things, the rationale of bowing, the rationale of the whole production of tones. That's a very important branch of physical acoustics. Now I want to tell you about something else. See, this is one of the instruments which we all know. You must have seen the busts or statuettes, Krishna blowing on the flute, and everybody dancing with joy, you see. Now this flute, now it looks very easy. Now if those of you who think it's very easy, I would advise you to buy a flute, not expensive, you know, and try to blow it. You'll find you can blow it all right, but the moment you try to finger it and blow it at the same time, it only produces a lot of squawks. It doesn't produce musical sounds at all. But even without handicapping yourself, I have learned with great difficulty how to blow the flute. Great difficulty. I must produce it. I will illustrating the difficulty of producing it, you see. You see, I am very far away from becoming a Sharabashastri, you know, miles away from becoming a flute player. There you are, you see? Why don't you applaud? Now you see, to blow a flute and play on it looks easy. It is not easy. Frankly, I tell you, it's not easy. It requires a lifetime of practice, same as learning to play the violin, so that you can really sit down and listen to it and not run away as fast as your legs can take you, you know. Now, it's the most interesting problem. Now, you see, this is rather difficult. But what is called a penny whistle, where is that? Oh, here it is. Now, this is very easy. You all know this thing, you see, this sort of thing. Child's play, anybody can do it, any boy can do it. You see, all that you do is this, you put your mouth, there you are. See, it's quite easy. And now if you blow a little harder, you get a terrible high pitch. You see, it's very easy. Now, the problem is this. Why is it difficult to blow this? And why is it easy to blow this? Now, if you understand that problem, you understand now what it is that the flute player does when he puts his lips like that. Now, you see, what he has got to do, which I found after a few misfires, was to produce a fine jet of air, and the fine jet of air must strike this edge here. You see, there's a round hole with an edge, and I must put it. There are two things I must do. First, I must get a jet of air and get the right velocity, and I must have my lips at the right distance from that edge. If everything is right, then it sounds. There's no difficulty in producing a sound here, because what has been done is this here. There's a narrow orifice through which the sound emerges, and there's a fixed jet, so I can't make any mistake about it. You see, the jet of air comes and hits it at a certain precise distance. And if I blow hard, all that happens is this, I overblow it and I get different harmonics. That is the reason why this is easy to blow and is not so easy to blow. But the essential principle, you see, is what is called the procession of vortices. You see, when you get a jet of air, it forms an alternate trail of vortices. Just as you take a teaspoon and you just move it in a cup of tea, you'll see an alternating procession of vortices following each other. Those vortices were first explained by Theodore von Karman, whom the Academy elected as an honorary fellow at his last business meeting. See, that the vortex procession is an extremely important thing in the whole of aerodynamics. And what has happened is this vortex procession must come out at such intervals as to coincide with the natural frequency of vibration of this pipe, with your closed or not closed as the case may be. It's the adjustment of the procession. The procession here, with a fixed edge and a fixed slit, the frequency of the procession is more or less fixed, with the result it's easy to blow. Here it's not fixed, everything is variable, and consequently it becomes very difficult to blow. Now the whole dynamics of the flute is an extraordinarily interesting thing. Now I want to show you very briefly, before I pass on, explain to you very briefly the mechanism of the Indian musical drum. I don't know if the mic will stand this racket. Leave it there. Don't switch it off. Leave it there. No, it's all right. I think it may stand it. Now I want to show to you the first four harmonics of the drum. The fifth is not easy to produce because it's rather a small instrument and I'm not holding it properly, you see. You don't hold it like that. You put it on the ground, you see. And I can't sit on the ground now. Not allowed. See, that's the fundamental tone in which the whole drum oscillates like that. The next one which is what is usually played. I almost learned how to do it. That's what it does. See, you hit it. You hit it to the edge like this. There you are. A player, of course, will do it hundreds of times without breathing. What you do is this, you strike it with a little finger, and immediately after striking it, you make the finger come into contact. The result is, it vibrates in two halves. But the same thing can be shown very nicely without all that. That's the fundamental. That's the first octave, and now I'll show you the third harmonic. See now, that's the third harmonic. The fourth is here. That's the fourth harmonic. Hear it? There it is. And it's all done by the graduation of the loading, with the result that the 9 overtones of the ordinary drum head are grouped 2 and 2 together. The vibrations become degenerate in the spectroscopic sense, if I may use the spectroscopic language, and you get the 5 tones. Well, I think I've spoken enough about music and musical instruments. Now I want to turn your attention to the basic problem. Why is there music at all? Why is it, let's ask ourselves, why is it that the human being, we are able to appreciate music? I have given you a little indication already in the fact that the ear is capable of perceiving the different tones, a sensation of pitch, loudness and quality. How is that done? How is that miraculous thing accomplished? Now that is an extraordinarily interesting question which has been engaging the attention of many workers. Helmholtz, for example, was one of those who in the last century made a very great effort to solve that problem. But I think it's been realized that the problem is very far indeed from being completely solved. Now I want to explain to you the nature of the problem. See, we have, as every elementary student of medicine, anatomy knows, we have what is called the external ear, you see. These are, I think, rather useless appendages. I don't know why they have remained, you see. They could easily have been dispensed with, but I suppose in certain cases they are probably regarded as ornamental. Let's concede that they are ornamental. Yes, with they're nice and nicely shaped, they can be ornamental. Not always, you know. Now then we have a cavity at the end of which we have what is called the drum skin. And then the drum skin has got 3 little bones. You see, they have got special names, scientific as well as common names. The hammer, the anvil, and the stapes. Now these three lock nicely with each other, and ultimately this little stirrup presses against a certain window, you see. And inside it, beyond that window and beyond is what is called the inner ear, you see. Now the inner ear, outside, is a remarkable fact, that outside is all air. Once you get to the stirrup, beyond that is liquid, and 2 liquids. There is inside what is called the inner ear, if I may say so, is a hollow in a bony cavity, that is, say, surrounded by bone, and it's a hollow. And the whole of the inner ear is inside this. You may call it, say it is part of it is the hollow itself. But that's not quite true, you see, because inside that again, there is a membranous cavity which sort of fits inside that. And the two together form, the whole inner ear forms a very remarkable structure. Structure is, I think I'll try to show it. Shall we start showing the pictures now, Krishna? Now it takes a lot. No, not that. Show this. Put on the slides. You first show the big picture with all the you know, just one of those, the whole bony. No, not that one. Show the. No, not that. You say. Show the. complete. Nothing, just the bony cavity, that's it. You see, it consists of, this again consists of three parts. One is, put in, it doesn't matter, go on, put it in. That's not it. Get that big one. That stout thing, you see. You find it difficult in picking it out? I should have arranged it beforehand. Go on. No, I don't need it. Well, you see, this is not quite the thing, but still you can see what it is. See, they've got three parts. This is what is called the semicircular canals, and there's a thing called here as cochlea, little shell, Now, please don't imagine it's as big as all that. Not at all. The entire cochlea, this thing here, like a snail shell, the entire size of it is not more than 1 naya paisa. You know what a naya paisa is? Put another one, not the inner section, Then afterwards you can show the, there it is, you see. Now this structure is a very remarkable, that's right. There it is. You've got the bony, just can you focus it please? There it is, you see. That's the cochlea, and that's the semicircular canals. Now all that is this representation of the hollow cavity inside the bone. Now inside that again is another, not this time a cavity, but a membranous tube which follows the outline, as it were. There is a membranous structure inside this hollow. And now these two structures, they are related to each other in a very remarkable way. You can see that here, you see. Now never mind, you put on the lights please. It's quite enough for me. Put on the lights. Don't worry. Lights on please. I should have arranged it beforehand. Don't worry, Balakrishna. Now we should have arranged all that before. Don't worry, you see. Why are you still? Lights please. Put on the lights. Don't worry, I say. Look here, Balakrishna. Don't trouble. I'm quite happy without it. Peace. Now you see, I want to explain to you. Can you put on the light here? Just put on this light. This light. This light. Put on this light. What actually, you'll all see it now, I hold it here. What actually happens is this, there is this a section of the cross-section at one point of this bony tube. Now this tube is divided into two parts. It's not, this is all bone. It's divided into two parts by another bony partition that comes along here. And this runs through, imagine this is only a section. The whole cochlea consists of a tube of this nature which is curled round and starts off and forms a, and now what happened is, what the real nature of the organ is the following. This is filled with liquid. That's also filled with liquid, both of them. And now there is crossing it another membrane called the ricinous membrane. See? Now this thing just shuts off a little part of that, and this bony structure is completed by a little membranous tissue which is called the basilar membrane. The basilar membrane stands between, as you see, the ricinal membrane and this liquid below. And on the top of this basilar membrane is a very remarkable structure called the Cortese organ. It's not one organ, about 5,000 of them following the whole circuit of the cochlea. And it's a very curious thing with a tunnel-like thing, some tongues across it, And then from here, the nerve fibers come along and they all join up, and the whole thing ultimately gets into the auditory nerve. See? Now, what is all this? What's the meaning of all this? Why this rhizoid membrane? Why this curious tunnel? Why all this thing? All that is a perfect mystery. Nobody has ever understood it. The anatomy of the ear is known very beautifully, analyzed to the last degree. But what exactly it does, nobody knows. The fact of the matter is this, you see, Helmholtz in the early years, in the last century, he put forward the idea that this basilar membrane vibrates, and that the length of the thickness of the basilar membrane and its length vary continuously from one end of the cochlea to the other. And he thought that the sounds of different frequencies traveling here affect the basilar membrane differently in its different parts. The high sounds come in at one end, and at the lower end, and the high sounds at the other end, and so on. And the nerves, therefore, are able to pick out, as it were, the different tones. The pitch of the different tones is recognized because they correspond to different parts of the basilar membrane. Now there is a fundamental difficulty about it, about the whole theory of Helmholtz, which I am afraid rather invalidates it. And the difficulty is the following. Curiously enough, nobody has ever realized the difficulty. The difficulty is this, that these two parts, what is called the scala tympani and the scala vestibuli, are in communication with each other. There's a big hole at the end, not so big, but still it's a hole. Compared with this, it's quite large. It's called the helicotroma. The helicotroma, see the sound, the stapes presses at one end, and there is a round window at the other end. Now, when this pressure acts, the two parts of the liquid are in communication with each other through the helicotroma. And every student of physics knows that if you've got a liquid that's practically incompressible, it's present inside a volume, if you try to exert a pressure at any part of it, every other part will also have exactly the same pressure at the same instant. In consequence, the basilar membrane would be subject. I think there's no way it's escaping that argument. The basilar membrane would be subject to equal pressures on both sides if we ignore the action of the basilar membrane and all these beautiful structures. In other words, the basilar membrane should not move at all. The basic difficulty in Helmholtz's theory is this: if his ideas are right, then the basilar membrane would be dead. The helicotroma would kill it completely. Nobody has ever asked himself, what is the purpose of the helicotroma? The helicotroma is essential because in order that if you go and squeeze it here, the liquid must go somewhere. And therefore, there's an opening so that it can push out to the other window. But that existence of the helicotroma prevents any difference of pressure on the two sides of the basilar membrane. And therefore, the basilar membrane cannot be set in vibration in the manner in which Helmholtz thought it could be. Now, this difficulty is a very serious one. And I have been thinking of late that the real solution for the problem of audition is to consider the influence, what is really happening there and there. That's not important. What is important is to find out what is happening in this little volume. Can the pressure inside, in the view of the presence of all these structures, can the pressure here and the pressure there be the same or not? And I think the mechanism of audition really arises out of the influence, the difference of pressure between this and that. And this pressure is altered by the presence of these various structures, the tunnel and so on. So all these structures, in my view, judgment, play a fundamental part in enabling the basilar membrane to vibrate and thus exciting the auditory nerves. This is the broad picture which I have tried to think out. I must confess, there are many points still very dark, and I only mention it because I'm quite sure in my own mind that the basic idea of Helmholtz's theory just won't work. Well, lights on. Ladies and gentlemen, I have done my full hour. I've been speaking for a full hour, and though I could tell you a great deal more about particular musical instruments and so on, I have no desire to prolong your agony. Broadly speaking, the subject really falls into three parts. The nature of music itself. Now that is a problem which I would leave to the academy, what is it, Sangeet, Natak or something, you see. And we have judges who tell us what the correct form of music is, all the the professors of music and musical practitioners. I don't want to enter that field at all. But the physics of music, broadly, as is taught in the treatise on acoustics, that is only an introduction. The real physics of music is when you discuss the mechanism. You can't have music without musical instruments. And unless you know how the musical instruments work, how they produce sounds, you have not really even touched the problem. Now there's one very great problem, you see, which I don't understand at all. And let me tell you quite frankly, I don't understand it. Why is it all of us are not able to sing like Kokila Dhwani somebody? Who is it? Subbalakshmi or something. What is it that makes the voices of different human beings, men as women, what is it that makes the difference? Is it merely a question of being able to control the voice? Is it merely a question of being able to make it go up and down? Or is there something in the quality of the voice itself? Now, one instinctively feels, on hearing a great singer, that while undoubtedly the technique of singing, that is to say his control of his voice, pitch, loudness, the way in which he modulates it and so on, that undoubtedly plays a very great part in our admiration of a singer. But behind it all are the vocal cords, which, as you all know, is just a pair of membranes or whatever you call them, tendons or something, which close the windpipe. When breathing, they're open. When you begin to talk or sing, they get tight, and then the puffs of air come out. Now there's something very mysterious in those puffs, which controls the quality of the voice. It's very difficult indeed. One can see those, see the vocal cords under ultraviolet and under stroboscopic illumination and so on, but to say that is one thing, and to understand the subtleties of the human voice is quite another thing. And there's a great mystery awaiting solution. Then we have a whole galaxy of musical instruments, which has only been I've done some little work on them. But still there is a great deal to be done in trying to understand the mechanics of the various instruments, the mechanical performance of them and so on. That is one branch. Well, that of course is a limited interest. The number of instruments is so large and the various possibilities are so great that is important, but it belongs to what might be called technical acoustics. Then we have this great and fundamental problem of the physiology of hearing. I've done today nothing more than indicate to you the basic difficulty in accepting, which I feel, in accepting the Helmholtz theory of the vibrations of the basilar membrane. I'm unable to accept it. And I think there is a problem, and to explain, to find out what is the role played by these wonderful structures, most elaborate and detailed structure, which you call the Cortis organ. That is a great problem awaiting solution. Well, that is something which is well worth doing. The connection between the psychology, we cannot ultimately explain our sensations. We have to take them for granted, they are there. We can understand the physics and the psychology. And what is really needed is, of course, to bridge them over, as I try to bridge it for light, to bridge them over by understanding in the first place the mechanism, the hydrodynamical mechanism which operates the Corti organs and disturbs the nerves. Then beyond that, of course, is the physiology, the neurological problem, what happens to the nerves, how the nervous impulses are able to determine how we are able to perceive the different qualities of tone. Why is it, for example, certain tones the harmonics fuse together, and why in some cases they don't, and so on. Those are all very subtle and interesting questions which belong to the subject of physiological acoustics. But I think the first and most important problem is to understand the real meaning and function of the Cortes organs. And that's the problem to which I hope in the course of the coming year or so to devote myself. Now this is the last function of the Academy meeting, and I think I should take the opportunity of, in the first place, of thanking the University of Madras and its Vice Chancellor for the opportunity they have given to me and to the fellows of the Academy to come here. They've been extraordinarily kind to us and most enthusiastic, and the secretaries, the reception committee and the volunteers have exerted themselves to the utmost to make our stay here pleasant and profitable, interesting. To them, I return on behalf of the Academy our most sincere gratitude. The next thing I have to say is this, that object of these meetings is not only in order to enable the fellows to come into contact with each other, renew their friendships, and listen to their latest achievements, but it is also to come into contact with the great public, educated public of the cities we visit. I'm glad that the Academy has come back after all these years, and the fact that this large hall is filled to capacity to listen to these lectures, and these lectures are especially intended as an exposition of the scientific activities to the larger non-professional audiences. That, the very fact that they've been here and listened to us with great patience and did not disturb the cathode oscillograph is a great tribute to their interest in the subject. I must thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for having made this meeting a success and having given me the satisfaction of talking to you about these fundamental problems. Thank you all.